Colliding Worlds is sponsored in part by Always Here, now streaming on Amazon Prime, starring Jodie Littman, Angela Romeo, and Steve Ciceron. Always Here. Some say the rules are made by the future, but in the LaFleur home, the past controls the future. Join them and the entire cast of Always Here. After all, a mother's love is forever. Now streaming on Amazon Prime.
Hey, everybody, this is Angela Valenti Romeo, and we're back again with another interview. And I think this one is going to be particularly interesting to those of you who are creatives because my guest is a director, a producer, a writer, an actor, and guess what? He's a coach. I'm going to bring onto the stage right now Christopher Gaunt. Welcome, Chris. You came on to this thing, like with gangbusters. I mean, you fell into this weird profession of acting. And as I'm fond of saying, and you and I can attest, you go on 500 interviews and you get rejected 600 times, and then you finally get a part. What possessed you to leave the security of like a quote real job to do this?
Yeah. First, thanks, Angela. I'm thrilled to be here. And it's interesting because I'm asked this question quite a bit. I had the chance and privilege of working for a very large company for 32 years, and I was really had the opportunity to stretch my wings with that company and do a lot of different things, and that's why I stayed so long. And I love the people, and I love the responsibility, and I love the challenge. But there came a time in my life where our kids were getting a little older. They were in college or exiting college. And my wife and I had a chat where I said that I really wanted to depart the comfort of that world and go into something very, very different. And that is, as you so nicely teed it up, I had a chance and still do to act, produce, direct, and write pretty much 24/7. So it was a decision that I jumped into, and I'm a type of person, Angela, where when I make a decision, I dive into the deep end very quickly. So I went on the high dive. I dove into the 12-foot section of the pool, not the shallow end, and I didn't gradually dive in. And right away, Kathy, my significant other of 33, soon to be 33 years,
Congrats.
we hit the road, Angela, and we probably drove 100 to 110,000 miles in 1 or 2 years, where I auditioned for everything in New York and the surrounding areas. So we're New Yorkers, but anything where I had an opportunity, whether it was student films, student thesis films, commercial work, short films, feature films, music videos, you name it. My objective was to get as much experience in this wonderful industry as possible, and knowing that in my mind, the internal clock was kind of ticking. So I wanted to try to get as much experience as quickly and as organically as possible. And it's kind of like a baptism by fire, which ended up helping me as I launched into directing, producing, and writing my own material, or helping those with their material.
It's the only way to do it. I mean, how I jumped into this show, Colliding Worlds, 12 plus years ago, was I went to a art gallery opening. I asked the person there why he was photoshopping the Mona Lisa, and he said to me, "It's not Mona Lisa, that's clip art." And my ex-husband at the time had to literally wrap his hands around my waist to stop me from lunging at him. The next day I went out and I bought a camera.
There you go.
And I made a TV show.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was doing, and then the next thing I knew, I had a radio show.
Yeah.
I sat down and you do it. You learn to do it. And the thing about acting is you can spend a lot of time studying and going over all of these things, but ultimately you got to get yourself out there, and it's brave when you do that, especially and I came I fell into it when I was a kid. I walked away from it because I was going to take a real job, and then you go back into it. It's You just got to do it, and it's a vulnerable time. I mean, I'm sure when
Part of you.
it has to be.
It's
When
part of you.
in your corporate world life, you were probably the boss. So
And it certainly didn't look like this. It was much more traditional. It was a button down and a blazer or a tie, short haircut. You looked the part. And from your lawyering days, I mean, there's a certain model. And the nice thing about this industry is that I really do feel like you can present and be your authentic and organic self. And whether that's accepted or not, who knows, right? But I do feel like every day when I wake up, I don't have to try to be someone that perhaps I'm not feeling I should be or want to be. Not necessarily a bad thing in my previous work life, but it's just it's more freeing to be this way, candidly. And whether that's acting, producing, directing, or writing, you can really express yourself the way that you want to express yourself.
And I think that's the best part. But here's the thing. Now you start out as acting, and I don't know, maybe you did the same thing I did. When I started acting again, I would walk up to whoever was there, the DP, the camera guy, the grip. Can I follow you?
Same.
And you follow them because you start out doing extra work. Unless you're Noah Wiley and you first audition, you land ER and that's the end of it.
One in a billion.
That to me is an amazing story. That was his first and only audition. But normally, if you're an extra, you've got all this time on the set and you're doing nothing.
Right.
When I was modeling, you sat around for hours, but you couldn't do anything, so you learned to knit.
Right.
But this was, trust me, and they didn't feed you and they didn't water you, so you had to do something.
Yeah.
But when I was an extra, I started following people around, and you learn how the parts fit together.
Sure.
You follow the director, the cameraman, and it rarely does anybody say no. Mostly they say, okay, just stay out of the way.
Yeah.
You did something similar, and did that kind of spark your interest in becoming a director or a writer or a producer?
Yeah. So, I mean, even going back further, Angela, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with a couple of things. One, obsessed with film and good television, good film, good television. And I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family where they had the similar interests. So we'd see something that we really loved and fell in love with, whether it was film, television, or theater. And we'd sit around typically on a Saturday or Sunday when we gathered for family dinners, and we'd talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. How would we have directed that scene? Would we have cast it the same way? Would we have shot it the same way? What about the location? What about performances? All that stuff. And we do that over and over again. So that was really fun and interesting. And I was also obsessed with sports. But the piece that, and the reason I'm bringing up the sports piece is that it's hard as a guy my age to go out and, put a football helmet on and play tackle football. But when I'm with a group, whether it's acting, producing, directing, and even writing, it's team, it's collaboration, it's having a definitive timeline. It's not infinite, right? So you have to get something done in a relatively short amount of time. You need to come together as a team in order to accomplish that objective. And to me, that replicates being on a sports team. So that's why I love the team approach. Not to say some of this isn't done, alone, but a lot of what I do is done as a team. So I fell in love with it as a young kid, and then kind of shelved it a little bit as I made my way, made a living, had a family, and was fortunate enough to be able to go back to it later in life, which is great. And I'll do this until I'm dead, God willing. So that part I loved. But to your point, when I was on a set, you have so much downtime. And I remember when I first started, I really was obsessed with getting roles that were speaking roles only. I really wanted to get speaking roles. So I really tried my best to do that. But even with speaking roles, as you know, 99% of the time, you're not on camera. So especially in the independent film world, they're looking for bodies to help. So I would help the DP. I would help do any lighting or any sound. I would help do anything. And during that process of helping, first of all, you get to know cast and crew better, which is great. But also it affords you the opportunity to ask a lot of questions and seek to understand, as I like to say. So ask questions and then listen intently so that you can begin modeling some of those behaviors that you think are good behaviors to model in this industry. And you learn a tremendous amount just by watching.
We have, and I'm the same way. I ever since I was a kid, I was fascinated with the details, and like I'm fond to say, I lived my life in the footnotes because the footnotes were amazing.
Yeah.
When we go to the movies or whatever, John, my other half, has now gotten used to it. You stay until the end. I want to see the lights come on, and I want the guy with the broom pushing me out, because the number of people who are involved in any production is amazing. Mission Impossible, the last one, I think Tom Cruise, they employed over 10,000 people.
Yeah.
And you think about that and how each of these parts fits together. And then you go into like a small scale, like what I do and probably what you do. It's like you don't have 10,000 people.
I wish.
I wish, right? I wouldn't know what to do with them. I had a hard enough time with a staff of 32.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
10 to 32. Yeah.
oh my God. It was like, oh, but when you know how the parts fit together, as a director, you're more involved with the crew and you're more involved with your actors. Do you find that having been an actor, it helps you work with your actors better, and having been that little wall, that little fly on the wall following everybody, you understand how things work better?
Yes. And I think even at my level, as it relates to acting, and I still have a long way to go, that I'm a proponent of, and I may have directors that are much better and more known than me disagree, but I think in my opinion, every director should try and act, because it's really, really tough to act and act well. And I think you become a better director if you're more empathetic with those that are acting, alongside you, that you're trying to tease out those performances. Again, my opinion, for what it's worth, is that I think it'd be hard to direct a performance if you hadn't sat in that seat and hadn't been an actor, because it is tough. It's the most unnatural surrounding and circumstances, where you have to let all that go away and be so focused on the performance and so engaged, when you have, chaos around you, right? Or a microphone an inch away from your face, or a camera that's coming in on you, and all of that has to go away. And as a director, that's helped me, because I get it, because I've sat in those, that other seat many, many times, and still love that part of it as well.
It's funny when you move that switch from being in front of the camera, behind the camera, it is a different world. I mean, you're as a director, you've got so many other things in your head that the actor's concerned with their role and breathing life into someone else's words.
Yes.
The director's got to breathe not only life into those words, but he's got to, think about, when I'm done, the producer's got to like this, the editor's got to help me, got to lay down the music. There's so many other little parts to it, but I think you're right. I think if you've been an actor and then you're a director, you're more sympathetic to that. I think if you've
Agreed.
when you watch what goes on around you, I think it makes you more sympathetic. But the other thing I think it does, and you do this, you're a writer. As
Sure.
a writer, I think I know when I write, I try to look at it as all of my characters have their own life, and I should give them that opportunity.
Of course.
Um,
Or
did
they
you?
shouldn't be in the screenplay. Yeah. If they don't have their own life and they're cardboard cutouts, they're just a cardboard cutout, then why have them? They should have their own arc and their own experiences that are very different than the other characters. Agree.
Now you've written some episodes and some different projects, and
Yes.
what was that like to be? Again, each one of these roles is a whole different ballgame. When you become a writer, it's like you see the world a little differently. And I don't know, as you're a director too, I have this problem when I write a script. I write it as if I'm going to be the director. So
Yeah.
it's like you got to sort of pull back. But what was it like to go and be a writer? I mean, and wearing all the hats, producer, director, actor. How does that affect your writing?
Yeah, it's a great question. Typically when I attack, say, not necessarily an episodic, which is so tight. So, if you're doing a series, typically that pilot has to be no more than 50 pages. But a feature, you have a little bit more runway room to be more, you can explore a little bit more in terms of length. So typically when I write, say, a screenplay, or I'm tackling a screenplay or an idea, I write like there's no tomorrow. There's no budget involved. There's no space or constraints involved. I'm not going to worry about any of that. And I remember going back a few years ago when I wrote a rough draft of a comedy that I'm still working on. I mean, I think the original, and I wrote it by hand on vacation, was 300 pages long, knowing that ultimately we have to trim this down to be 90 pages, around 90 pages, which is where it's at now. But I write like there's no constraints. And then the producer side of me kicks in, and the practical side of, okay, we have to shrink whatever that page length is down to, if it's a comedy, 90 pages, if it's a drama, between 100 to, say, 110 pages. I start thinking about costs and locations and actors and all the other details that come into play when you're trying to get a product or a production up on its feet. And as you know, there are a million variables that impact those decisions. So as a writer, initially I want to try to be very free, and then the practicality side kicks in because I do a lot of producing where I was like, okay, we can't have a 300-page screenplay. We need to make it 90 pages. And here are all the decisions that will impact by taking that from where it is now to something that we can get up on its feet, vis-a-vis a film.
That's an interesting thing because when you start to do the cost, I mean, I was a line producer and it was like my job was to say no.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah,
like, no. It's like, well, I need this. Okay. And then you sit there and you go, okay, if you need this, then you got to give up that. So
exactly.
what is it that you want to do? It, it's interesting, especially when you do independent, because you're talking about a non-budget.
Right.
It's like we did our television series, and I hate to tell you what we were paying per episode. It's mind-boggling. And then when I went to pitch it, they're like, well, could you think you can bring in this half hour show for about a budget of 500,000? I'm like,
Yeah.
crap, I could do the next 40 years. It's there's a difference when you start to have to play all these different roles. And director, producer, writer, everybody's kind of, they're tugging against each other because everybody wants and wants and wants. And then you have to sit there and make decisions when you're doing all three. And you were kind of everything on some of these projects.
Yes.
Psychologically, how do you decide who wins? I mean, you're fighting with yourself.
It's tough. And you make a really good point about the budget piece. I mean, we're grinding through a series right now called The Fledgling, which is so good. And I know I'm biased, but we just spent 4 months with two really, really well-known showrunners in Hollywood. They're wonderful guys, a guy named Todd Slavkin and a gentleman named Darren Swimmer. Great guys. They've done 15 or 20 series, 300 episodes, and they've been working with us for 4 months, Angela, on fine-tuning a 56-page pilot so that we can get it in shape where it can be presented to their reps. And then if their reps like it, they'll present it to the trade. And if the trade likes it, we're fortunate enough to get meetings to go and try to sell this and bring it up on its feet. But an average episode for this particular production, at least $1 million, at least, I mean, if not more. So say 8 episodes, and you're looking at it between a 10, 15, $20 million project where you need, in my opinion, large production companies to get their arms around that. Sure, you can go try to self-finance that and do it on your own. Good luck. I mean, I've done fundraising campaigns where we're trying to get, back-end money to finish up post-production, and I've worked 6 months to raise $70,000. It's just really, really tough finding the money, even with really, really solid projects. So, but it's a grind, right? And there's so many decisions that have to be made, and it becomes not just your project anymore, but a total collaboration and a team effort in order to get it done. And then even with that, there's no guarantees that it'll be sold or picked up. So to me, the biggest learning, on this journey that I'm continuing to be on is by wearing those 4 hats: act, write, direct, produce. I feel like I'm not only more knowledgeable, but more empathetic about each of those individual scorecards that need to be checked upon. Actors have their own scorecard. Directors have all the things they juggle. Producers have 10 million things that they need to worry about. And then writing, same thing. It's so hard, in my opinion, to write a good screenplay. It can take years and years of fine tuning, forever, and it still can be worked upon. So it's good to wear those 4 hats because to me, I think everyone in the creative space needs that experience to really understand what the other folks are doing in order to get something up.
It's also interesting when you start working on a project, especially if it's when you're doing all the hats and wearing all the things, and you're doing craft services, location, you're doing all of these things, casting. You are invested in this, not just financially but emotionally.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting journey, and you're right. It's you put your heart and soul into something that may never happen. We've got a series that I've been working on, and to your point, we put together a pitch deck, we did all these things, and in the end we decided to just do it alone.
Yeah.
And there's a good side and there's a bad side to that.
Sure.
You've got to juggle all of these things, but what's interesting when you play all of these roles, to your point too, you see it differently. And there's always a side of me that when I do it, that the director side always wants to win. I don't know why. um, Partly because I don't know, I can't explain it, but you, as a director, I think, the way I see it, I think the director is the parent.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to really kind of rein people in, and
Yes.
then then the producer will try to rein you in, but
Yes.
you it's not an easy process, and episodic is one thing, film is another, and you've done both. I mean, when you do a film, it's the same deal. Do you sell the script? Do you option the script? Do you do it yourself? Do you do the festival thing? I mean,
Yep. I've done it all.
and,
Yeah.
let's go on an indie film. There's always a split about whether do you try to sell it to a studio, or do you try to option it with a production company or an actors? A lot of actors have their own production companies. What do you kind of feel leaning towards when you do something like that?
The majority of independent films, Angela, that I've been involved in, we've done ourselves. So, I mean, I find, if I'm producing it or executive producing it, acting in it, or whatever my role is, I'm trying to find, really excellent writers. So really well-written scripts, unless I'm collaborating with a writer on that script. And then we do the rattling the tin can, where we're going out and trying to find the money. And you can find the money. It's just a matter of, can you find the money that you want and need, in your opinion, as the director or even the producer, to make the production or the film that you want to make. And there's always concessions with that. So now, as I'm doing more writing and more collaborating with writers and kind of ramping up the game a little bit, focusing less on short films and much more on feature films and television or episodic series, you're finding that, or I'm finding at least, that the practicality of being able to do that on your own lessens, because the budgets are much larger, the timelines are more expansive. Like you said before, with the Mission Impossible example, many more people are needed to bring those productions to life. So, and you lose some of that control. You lose some of that control as a producer and certainly as a director. So, I guess my only perspective or coaching would be, maybe that's the wrong word, is that I think as the scale of the project increases, you have to recognize you're going to lose a little bit of that control, unless you can self-finance, with which so few of us in this world can do, because it's so darn costly. So it requires even more collaboration and losing a little bit of that control, and trusting the people you're working with and trusting the process that it can get done. But having said all of that, there's still no guarantee. I mean,
There's no
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 guarantee.
no guarantee. And here's the thing. I mean, and I've been on it from different angles, where a project will get done. And I saw it when I was working more in the music business as well, too. It's done.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
It
Now,
doesn't see the light of day. For whatever reason, it doesn't see the light of day. And you sit there and you got to wonder, like, well, why? I mean, was it not good? Was it bad? Well, what is it? And there's so many variables that come into play afterwards, that, the timing was right. Somebody else came out with something similar, whatever. But I look at it now, we have been through 2 writer strikes and
yeah.
an actor strike.
Yeah.
The first writer strike, to me, brought forth a lot of reality TV, which I'm not a fan of. The second writer strike, I think, opened up some avenues for non-union writers.
Yes.
The actor strike, and I'm a SAG member, um, and it opened up avenues for other people to bring projects forth because of the streaming services.
Yeah.
Um, you've got that all kind of in front of you. It's like, is this a great time to be an independent producer, or are you fighting against a bubble?
Yeah, it's great. I think if you line up 10 people, they may say 10 different things about that. I think there's always room. Again, my opinion, speaking as one person, there's always room for really good content out there. And I think because of the number of streaming options out there, there's just more content. And I think of my wife and I that watch really good content on an evening basis. Every evening we're watching something that is pretty darn good. And we're very discerning. If it's not, then you have a million other choices. But with so many streaming services out there, you have endless amounts of content that you can enjoy watching that suits your needs. And we also still love going to the movie theater. We love it. I mean, it's such a great experience, in my opinion, to go to the theater again. And I'm hoping that more and more people will get into theaters. And I think some films recently have gotten more bodies into theaters again, which is great. So to answer your question, as an independent film artist and maker, I think there's always room with streaming capability to get your product out there, provided it's really well done. It hasn't been done or seen a million times before, or there's a slightly different twist to whatever you're trying to create and put out there. Having said all of that, I mean, we know that there's certain things that can propel one to want to gobble up content. Having a known actor or actors attach, having incredibly good content with known writers so that you can actually get yourself into a pitch room and present your material, as opposed to working with incredibly talented writers that just haven't gotten that break yet, that aren't well known. And I'm dealing with that now on a few projects where the writing is really solid. We love the story, but we don't know this person yet. It's chicken and egg. How do you get known if someone's not willing to take a chance on you? So I do think that there's so much content out there. So we know that films and episodics are still being churned out and made on a very regular basis. I think to be determined where that shakes out. In my opinion, I think there's going to be a consolidation of streaming organizations. The strong will survive, much like every other business. It starts very wide and then it gets tight. The strong ones gobble up the smaller ones, or the ones that aren't as robust for whatever reason. And we see that in every industry. So, but I still think there's room for a ton of content, and really good content, both in the movie theater world as well as the streaming world. So I'm bullishly optimistic about that. And my attitude has always been next project up. So if this project, for whatever reason, isn't finding the audience, then come to them, whoever them is, the decision makers, with other projects. My coaching, don't stop with one project.
No.
Right.
You have to have something else. I always tell people, it's like the first question they're going to ask you is, what else do you have?
Exactly. What else?
And it might not be, it may not be what your heart is behind, but you have to be realistic. I mean, this is the other part. You're an artist. I'm an artist. Yeah. But the other thing that we have that a lot of them don't have, we came from the business.
It's a business.
This is a business. It's not. I remember having an art gallery, and one of the artists came to me and said, I think I should get 100% of whatever I got. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. Well, you didn't create it. I said, yes, I did create it, because I'm giving you the space. I'm taking the risk, and I should deserve to be back. And this is the problem, is that a lot of people who are not a lot. Okay. There are people in the business who look at this and go, I'm an artist. You should love me. Give me money. I'm great.
Good luck.
Thank you. And it's like, I hope your dad's got tons and tons and tons of money, because I don't know how else this is going to happen. You have to be practical about it. And yes, with all the streaming services available now, there's and a lot of actors, as part of their deals, now have gotten their own production companies, so you can kind of go that route. You've got an influx of film festivals, but the other thing I think that's opened up has been the foreign markets.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And and I had a client who was in the music business who couldn't get arrested running naked through New York City, but oh my God, in the Netherlands, in the Scandinavian countries, they were gods.
Yeah.
So I mean, do you look at the foreign market as?
Of course, yeah. I'll give you an example. There's a couple of genres that translate very well into markets outside of North America. And I referenced a comedy that I've been working on for a while now, and comedies typically don't. I mean, comedies that are written and developed and shot and produced and shown in North America, oftentimes that humor, comedic humor, does not or will not translate to other lands, very different sense of styles and humor. So I'm trying to do a better job, if I'm looking at, the project in totality. Will North America accept this film, and does it have the possibility of doing well from viewership and ROI, et cetera? But also, is this, whatever we're making, is it transferable outside North America? And there's certain genres, and you know this, Angela, that are horror transferable, thriller transferable. Some dramas could be more or less transferable, but but for sure, thrillers and horror, those are genres that do well in North America. And if it's shot here, can do equally as well, if not better, in other lands. So I'm trying to be more discerning with the projects I say yes to and attach to, particularly as a producer, and even not necessarily as an actor or even a director, but really as a producer, where it is about the business aspect. So thank you for bringing that up. It's about the business, and will they gobble it up in North America, and does it have the opportunity to be gobbled up in terms of an ROI and viewership outside of our borders? Really important.
It's very interesting when, I think, when you're an independent, because that's a market that's, even when, like I said, I'll go back, even when I was in the music business, you would go to these conferences and they would buy it outright or they would license it outright. It was, you're already produced, so now it was your gravy, so to speak.
Sure.
And I saw that, you see it every once in a while, and I laugh when I look at a lot of comedies. To your point, you bring up a comedy, you look at All in the Family was a remake of a British show.
Yes.
Because that did not translate to the US audience. Yeah. Benny Hill, God, my father loved Benny Hill. I never got it.
My dad's favorite show. My father made us watch that as kids constantly.
Oh, my father loved Benny Hill. Benny Hill did kind of make that transition. Monty Python did in a big way. And I've never quite understood that. I mean, the book on Monty Python's about to be about 6 inches thick, but it was a rarity for a comedy to do that.
The Office did it. I mean, British and then UK and then adopted in North America, or adopted in the States and did very well, but few and far between, right? I mean, It's not a recipe for success.
No, I mean, like, what was it? What was the show David Hasselhoff did? Baywatch.
Baywatch, yes.
Baywatch, and what was the other one?
I think they're rebooting that, by the way.
I know, and the one with the car. What was that one?
Oh, Kit was the car, the talking car.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was like somehow or another that translated, and it's you got to wonder sometimes, was it a personality thing or what was it? But it's interesting when you talk about horror seems to translate across, like okay, this is my prejudice. I see the remake of the Japanese movies.
Yes.
The Ring and all. It was better in the Japanese version. So far, they have not made a American or U.S. version of The Audition. And if you've never seen that, you will never go on an audition again. Yeah. That one scares the crap out of me now. There's something that gets lost in translation. But I think that you're, as an independent producer or director, you can't not look at those markets. Because they, it's you're done. Your product is done.
Yeah. I read a stat. It was Napoleon Dynamite, I think, made in 2003, 2004, made for a ridiculously low budget, like $400,000 for a very small independent film budget. And they paid their actors virtually nothing. I'm sure those contracts have been renegotiated a million times now, but it made something like, I'm close, $40 to $42 million in North America, but not much at all outside of the North American borders. So to me, that's a really good example of how that very unique, genre-specific, and very unique comedy did very well in the States, but didn't really translate well outside of the U.S. And I get it. I've watched the film. I get it. I get the humor for the States, but I could see how that wouldn't translate well outside of the United States or Canada, except North America, essentially. So I'm trying to be more like, okay, if that's the objective, to get something that is gobbled up by more than just the States, think through that. And the times to think through that is when you're presented with projects. Which ones do you attach to? Not when you're deep into production, woulda, coulda, shoulda, like, oh my gosh, too late. Like you said, it's already been produced and it's in the can. So now what do we do with it? Who's going to buy this? And those are all business discussions that have to be done in the pre-production, pre-planning phases, years before it's brought to life on film, or I think you're in trouble.
One of the things I found interesting with independence is the looking outside of the States for funding. I had a friend who is a producer, and he's produced some pretty well-known films, took his project to Ireland.
Yeah.
Because the incentives were amazing. Yeah. And they were willing to work with people even with a teeny tiny budget. And when I say teeny tiny, it's like, oh, it's $1 million. Like you toss that around like it's still, don't you have that in the bottom of your purse?
But that's
But
a ton, but even Angela, that it's a ton of money. The way our industry talks about money for, oh, it's only a $3 to $5 million independent film. Where are you going to go get that? Who has that money? Where do you find that? So I find it interesting how we dimensionalize, big money from small money. It's crazy.
it's crazy. And what I found interesting was he took the project and he moved it to Ireland because they have below the line, which your camera, your gaffer, they have a
Yep.
lot of below the line ready-made talent there. And they offered good incentives. They offered, in money and in kinds and whatever.
Yeah.
And so all he did was change the location.
Wow.
And he was able to take the story and move it over, but it was thinking outside the box. And
I love that.
and that's kind of where you and I, if we're going to do this, have to think outside the box. I mean, do you when you look at the foreign markets, do you think about the incentives that are available in certain places? And
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I mean, even in the States, I mean, certain states, like I live in New York, work a lot in New York, but both coasts and everywhere in between. But there's tax incentives in New York, but I'm hearing there's better tax incentives in other states that aren't far from New York. And maybe the incentive may not quite be as rich or just as, but you're more likely as a filmmaker to get that incentive quicker than in another state that you may choose to film in. That's why you see states in the US that have become big film cities or states. Atlanta, Cincinnati, Ohio, New Jersey. New Jersey is becoming a very big film state. Massachusetts is becoming more of a larger film state. So it goes on and on. But there has to be something that's dangled in front of the filmmaker to entice him or her to want to go and do that and explore those as options. And exploring the foreign market option is brilliant. Why wouldn't you want to do that? If it's just changing the location and it doesn't really impact the nature of the production, I think we as filmmakers should be open to that as an idea and a possibility. Of course, of course. Why not? It's a great enticement.
oh, it is. And then you talk about the tax incentives as a producer, director, writer, and you think about those locations are key and you want to work with people. Atlanta has boomed. Atlanta boomed. I mean, Nashville is on the cusp of really,
Excellent.
going forward. The
Yeah.
Carolinas. Um,
Carolinas.
and you have these states were offering you, come and let us help you.
Yes.
And I think when you're a writer or a director or producer, it's important to kind of look at that because people think the coast. They think everything is LA. If I'm not in LA, oh my God, I'm never going to make it. What are your thoughts on that as an
Oh,
actor, director, writer, producer?
I think the person that really served it up that I heard on social media was Mark Wahlberg. And I may have it slightly off, but he said, I've been doing this for 30 years at a very high level. And if I recall, Mark Wahlberg, who does it all, right? I think he said at that time, and this is a year or two ago, that he had only made or had shot 4 of his films that he was either in or involved in LA. So, said another way, all the other projects that he had worked on were outside of the LA market. And that's not a slam on LA. It's just that for whatever reason, that production chose to shoot somewhere else, or they were able to replicate a New York City or an LA somewhere else that perhaps was much more economical with better tax incentives. And again, this isn't a knock on LA or New York, but there's so many places we can, as filmmakers, particularly independent filmmakers, can go and replicate New York in a city that's not New York, or replicate, if it's an LA type setting, in places that aren't LA with really attractive incentives attached. So I
It's
thought, to me, that was a really good example because he's lived the life for 25, 30 years at a very high level. So he knows that.
it's an interesting thing to do that too because not everybody lives in a big city.
Right.
You've got to think about who your audience is as a, not so much as a writer, because a writer, I think you're going to write which it's in your heart, but as
Sure.
a director or producer, you have to think about, not everybody lives in Manhattan. Not everybody lives in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, which is a beautiful city. But
Yeah.
you've got to think about your location and how it fits as your audience. And as an independent, that's a very important thing.
Sure.
And now you've got AI.
Yes.
As a writer, director, producer, I mean, you cannot ignore AI. And I mean, how do you see it impacting, or do you see it impacting what you do?
Absolutely. So, I mean, as an actor, it's like, okay, is AI going to replace? And I know there's been a lot of conversation and, really good, healthy back and forth on this. But in my opinion, again, one person talking this, in my opinion, the AI train has left the station. So it's not if, it's a given, it's when, right? So how that manifests itself in our industry to the full extent, I think we're just on the cusp of understanding that, whether it's more background roles being parlayed into the AI arena, whether it's, all the voice work that we've been hearing about that's AI generated. And again, some people on one side of the fence may say that's terrific. Another group may say that's the worst thing that's ever happened to the industry. So I think it's one of those things that's going to consistently be chatted about for many months and years to come. But in my opinion, we're just seeing the beginning pieces of AI. Again, that train has left the station, and I think it's only going to grow as it relates to this industry, as it relates to the acting work, as it relates to voice work, as it relates to productions and locations. And the list goes on and on and on. So total production, can be AI generated, right? Probably. And again, I'm not in that world in terms of the numbers, but at a cost that's very different than, either hiring actors or finding locations, et cetera. If it can be artificially generated, I think an economy of scale, as a businessman, an economy of scale will come into play, and they'll figure out a way to make that very affordable. Will that actually take the place of human beings like you and I, Angela, chatting and having this wonderful conversation? I pray that it won't, because there's nothing like, even as actors, having a scene partner where you're feeling that connection and that passion. And that's why we do this, right? I get getting goosebumps talking about it. I hope it doesn't. But again, it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. I think it'll only grow in our industry and all industries.
In a weird way, I look at it, AI has always been here. It was called animation.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, if you think about that, it was animation, and then it
Or
sort of
CGI, right? CGI. I mean, right? CGI and animation. Yeah.
and you look at, was it Singing in the Rain? You had Gene Kelly dancing with Tom and Jerry or whatever it was. You had Avatar.
Yeah. Great.
It's here, and it's like, how do you handle it and what do you do? But to your point, and I think as an actor, one of the best things that happens on a set is that happy mistake, those
Yeah.
lines that no one,
Yeah.
that Pretty Woman where he slaps the box,
Right.
no AI generated character could do it. And Jack
Agree.
Nicholson standing on the stand going, "You can't handle the truth." That wasn't scripted.
That wasn't scripted. Some of the
You
best
know,
film aren't. Yeah.
here's Johnny. I mean, all of these things are not something that an AI created actor could do.
I saw an interview with Matt Damon, and he was not on set for one of these days early in filming of The Departed. And Jack Nicholson was talking to Scorsese about a film where he kills someone in a cornfield. And he said, if you really want to make this scene great, here's what you do. If you really want to make it better, here's what you do. And he went on and on and on about a quarter-page scene. And Scorsese was listening because it's Jack Nicholson. They ended up shooting much of what Nicholson had said. And Scorsese then in editing trimmed it back to something manageable. But because of that interaction, and by the way, Nicholson's a great writer and has that instinct as an actor and as a great writer, he made that scene so much better than it would have been had it been done the way it was written on the page. And then Scorsese, because he was directing it and managing the editing process, was able to pare it back to where it's manageable. But to your point, if AI had been involved, you wouldn't have that richness of dialogue or that creativity. So that's where I'm concerned. It becomes too sterile and too perfect. And the imperfection of this business, I think, is what makes it beautiful and
It's
great.
the warts and all. I mean, I see AI from a producer standpoint as cutting down costs because I can create my environment. I don't need to go to Paris. I can make Paris right here.
You got it.
I mean, I see that as being I see that as being a boon to someone who's an independent, because now I can set my movie in Morocco,
Sure.
but I don't have to go there.
Yep.
I see that as a help to some extent in it, just because, as we talked about, an independent film is really being held together with, like, spit and a handshake half the time.
It's a
And
guy, bubble gum, a paper clip, a rubber band.
whatever's there, it works. It's like, okay, well, I didn't have scotch tape, but hell, I got duct tape. Let's go,
To a separate race for post-production and a separate race for marketing and a separate, I mean, it's endless. It's endless.
I mean, as a line producer, having done line producing, I look at sometimes as AI going, okay, well, if we can create that with AI, then I can give you this.
Yeah.
I think I look at it. The drone was the biggest thing to help an independent film, because I did not have to hire a helicopter or an airplane or anything.
Yeah, establishing shots that are beautiful. All you need is someone with a drone license that knows how to fly the darn thing. And the technology is there, and the output is unbelievable. It's so beautiful. It's great. And you don't need a crane, and you don't need a helicopter.
It's a logarithmic increases has been amazing. I mean, the guy who I work with, when he had his first drone, it was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing in the world. And now the drone, it folds up, it knows how to come home. He's so adept. He actually filmed inside a church, a mid-century church. They hadn't been able to see the roof and the steeples and whatever. Yeah, so he did it. It's been a help in that regard. And so as a producer director, I mean, I kind of look at it as, yeah, it's going to help me. As an actor, I sit there and I go, they did the movie The Blow Up Doll, but the doll, she came to life, but she was still a human. You have to put everything in perspective, and because we're wearing all these hats, I think it's really incumbent upon us as creatives to understand that it's there, and how do we live with it without destroying ourselves. And there's still nothing about two actors doing a scene where you don't know what's going to happen.
It's the best. It's those happy accidents, as you said, or it's accidentally dropping the cell phone. It's doing something that totally is not scripted, where you're actually listening to your scene partner, him or her, and how they react to that happy accident, and then reacting after what you've seen them do or how they've reacted. And that can't be replicated in AI, and I hope it never is. But to your point, I think you made a great point, and that is, if you have if you're fortunate enough to be able to wear the hats, so act, produce, direct, and write, you kind of get, again, my opinion, the entire picture. If you're an actor saying, oh my gosh, am I going to be outsourced as a background actor, or even as a strong or not so strong supporting actor in a particular film by AI, then to me that would be very threatening. But if you wear all those hats, and to your point, it's about concession, right? So if we're able to use AI to replicate a scene, that means that we'll have more budget to hire the actors that we want to have those beautiful, lovely, organic moments. Because again, it's all about compromise, right?
Yes.
And as a producer, like you said, line producing a couple of times in this discussion, you get that. But if you don't have that experience, you're automatically assuming, oh, I'm being outsourced, or I don't have a spot or room. There's no room for me in this particular industry anymore. So it's good to have that holistic picture. But that's
I don't think that we'll all be out. I look at something with Gone with the Wind, that big scene where they're in Atlanta, where all the soldiers, that's all
the burning of Atlanta. Yeah.
And that was all when he directed that. There was one guy with a bunch of little people on a pole, and when he moves his arm, everybody moves. It was because he couldn't afford that, so he had to compromise. I look at some of these things as compromising, and again, because you and I are in this in a different perspective, I think there's that double-edged sword. It's our friend and our enemy. I think as an actor, I think you worry, and you may not need to. I know that there was a talk about it. They said they thought AI in the movie industry would be a boon for theater, because you can't have a robot actor. And I'm like, you're right.
Yeah.
And I only did theater once, and that was scary enough. But
Yeah. Right.
it's an interesting take, and
Yeah.
I'm
Theater,
glad.
live humans. There won't be robotic theater actors. Who's going to go to the theater? Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to go to that. I want to see those happy accidents on. Sure.
If you want to go to that, you go to Disney World and you see it's a small world and they all go like this. Or what is it? The Country Bear Jamboree.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's fine. I'm good with that. I can handle that, but this is in addition to everything you do. And I'm going to bring this up. You do a lot of coaching.
Yes.
What's it like to be a mentor? And how did you fall into that?
My absolute favorite thing in life is that. So even when I was in the more traditional business environment, I was always fortunate enough to be able to be asked to be mentored by people. And I absolutely love that. So I used to call it kind of the current best approach. Here are the things that I definitely would do again, in my life or in this particular experience, in this case, act, direct, write, produce. And here are the things that I absolutely would never do again if you paid me $1 million because, it wasn't a good outcome. And I do think you learn a lot more, and this sounds cliche, but for me anyway, you learn a lot more from your mistakes than you do your successes. And I've always kind of taken that into mentoring or coaching. So how I got into it is kind of concurrent to the acting, producing, writing, directing journey. I went and got certified as a life coach in Philadelphia back in, 2017 or 2018, because I really wanted to do that in conjunction to the entertainment work. And now I'm really lucky because so often, whether they're young people, like literally quite young, or older like me, but young in the business, I'm given that opportunity to kind of coach them and walk them through some things that I think may help them along their journey for their consideration. They don't have to agree. It's kind of like for what it's worth discussion. Here are some things that I recommend or I've done that may help you. And here are some things that I have done that I think you should not replicate for whatever reason. And again, I think you learn a lot more from your mistakes and your successes. So I've always loved that. I'm very kind of philanthropic in nature. When I'm not doing this work, Kathy and I, we volunteer for many 501c3 nonprofit groups, helping animals, helping people that are homeless, those that are in need for a number of different reasons, animals and humans. So I've always had that, kind of ingrained in me and wanting to do that. And as I'm getting older now, it's more about giving back, not only to the artistic community, but to other communities that I'm very privileged to be able to do that. So I feel very lucky I can do that. But selfishly, I get a lot of fulfillment from it too. It's a blast. And I like seeing people go from point A to point B to point C in their journey, whatever that journey may be.
Well, the funny thing about coaching and acting and directing and all that, I mean, one of the things that's really kind of cool is when you have somebody you work with as a mentor, you're a teacher. I had an acting coach, and Doris Roberts was in her class.
Nice.
Doris Roberts was, and she took acting lessons her whole life.
Yeah.
Pablo Casals was famous for saying, "Why do you practice?" Because I want to get better. You only get better when you practice, and I think you only get better when you work with somebody. So to somebody come on and say, "Hey, look, I can be your coach," I think that's a selfless act. I mean, most coaches who do this do it because there's a love. You got a few who do it because they think it's quick money. But you've got to look at it and go, what can you offer and what can you give? And because you do all these things, it makes you. I haven't taken a coaching class, but I'm really considering taking the acting one here. You got a better perspective and a better idea of what goes on, and
Yes.
imparting that knowledge is priceless. And I think, there used to be a time. Yeah, this is right when I start to feel old. When you sat at your great grandma's knee and you learned things, you learned the family recipe, you learned the family history, you had respect for something that came before you. And I think that that's an essential part of being a coach. You have scars, good and bad. You have scars, and if you could help somebody, I think that's awesome. If somebody wanted to get involved, would they just be able to find you at this website, or do they need to go somewhere else?
Yeah, my website is the website www.chrisgauntactor.com. I'm all over social media. All of my handles: IMDb, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all Chris Gaunt. And Insta is Chris Gaunt Actor. The best way is on my website on the coaching tab. If someone's interested in having a chat with me, it's very easy to get a hold of me. I'm extremely accessible. And I will say I'm an animal on social media and my emails. Like, I don't let anything rest. That's just the nature of the business. It's hard to be known or get employed or talk about the industry if you're not active. In my opinion, if you're not actively engaged. So I don't sit on anything, and I guess I'll sleep when I'm dead because I enjoy this too much. So I'm one of those guys that go because I love it so much.
I always felt like, there'll be plenty of time to rest at another time and place, but the interesting thing, and I'll go back to this, it's like you're an actor, director, producer, writer. There's nothing more, I think, inspiring. There's nothing more exciting than to be a creative because you can't stop.
No, you can't.
I used to think if there was the ideal job, I wanted to be a student because I just like there's so much to learn. You can never stop learning. And then I sort of changed that to an artist. And because I truly believe that we're all born artists, and that's kind of been my tagline for years. But what you do with it shapes who you are. And you and I both took a journey where we knew deep in our hearts we were artists, but we went this way because somebody said this is how you do it. But you always go back to it. I mean,
it's something that it's in you. I think it's inside of you, and it's something that no one could ever take away from me. I don't care if I was in a box someplace. I mean, there's no way that I'm not going to do what I'm doing. And I force myself, even when I'm having discussions with Kathy and our kids or friends and neighbors, I force myself not to be thinking, to stay engaged in those discussions and not to be thinking about the latest screenplay I'm working on or a production challenge or an acting opportunity. It's really tough. And I remember listening to an interview recently where Jerry Seinfeld was talking about, how he comes up with his bits. And he said, there's never a time where I'm not in my mind writing a bit. Every discussion I have, every interaction I have with my wife and kids or with friends, I'm thinking, how can I turn that into a comedic bit? It's in him. So it's in us, and in my opinion, if you don't have that passion and that fire, then for God's sakes, go do something else. Because it's really hard. It's a really, really challenging, hard business. So if you don't love it with every part of your being and every pore of your body and every cell, then God, go do something else. Because you have to get that enjoyment for the love of it. And then if success comes after that, great. But if that's the only reason you're doing it, then again, my perspective would be go chase something else because
it's brutal. It's a brutal thing. I remember, and my brother ran cross country when he was in high school. My brother, God bless him, I love him to death. He was not a cross country runner, and he would come in last. And people would say to him, and he'd have a big smile on his face. And they're like, what? And he goes, I did it.
Right.
And that was his answer. I did it. And this is the kind of thing when you're a creative, you can't stop. I mean, in that TV show, Ms. Maisel, whatever, she always had the notebook writing things down. I get upset. I have a notebook by my bed because I get upset if I wake up and the idea has now slipped out of my brain.
Here's
right?
mine every day.
You have to. You've got these notebooks all over the place, and God help somebody who touches them because you want to kill them.
I have my kitchen now 3 all over with notes and projects I'm working and projects that someone has come to me on that I'm noodling. Should I get involved or not? It's endless, but that's what gets us up in the morning, right, Angela? That's why we do this.
Oh yeah, I mean, I go back to this podcast, this show. There's no reason for me to do this.
Right.
Why do I want to put myself through this, right? And it's like I was like, oh my God, fighting with this company, fighting with that, but the people you meet along the way make it interesting.
Yes.
And I feel like it's kind of like a cool opportunity to let people like you come on and say, hey, here I am. This is what I do. And what I like about it, especially in this particular genre, in acting and producing and directing and writing, there's room for all of us. I mean, some are better than others, and just because you have an iPhone, you are not Francis Ford Coppola, and because you can take a photo, you are not Ansel Adams. There's still
Yeah.
a level of skill,
Sure.
and you have to go through, but it's something that when you get to somebody who can help you as a coach, I mean, this is where you take advantage of someone like Chris, where you can meet up with him, you can talk with him, and you can and you know the other thing is you might find after you've had a couple of sessions that no, I'm not a director. It
Sure.
some people it's not them, or I'm
Yeah.
not a writer, but you never know until you try, and sometimes you need somebody else to come along. You need your scene partner,
Yeah.
you know, and
Or Angela, I had a discussion recently where this particular individual loved acting, but through the course of the discussion, they really realized that they really didn't find themselves being able to sustain that and being an actor for the entirety of their career. And they're fairly young. So, they found themselves gravitating more and liking directing more. Then go be a director.
oh,
But
I love
but
directing.
you've learned by being an actor, so now you'll be a better director as a result of that experience being an actor. Now you can say, I act and I direct. And
I
maybe,
love
right? And then maybe she will want to be a producer someday or a writer or whatever. So you don't have to stay in your lane. You don't have to stay in your lane.
I'm sorry, I don't think you or I ever stayed in our lane.
No,
I remember I was being a
I,
little kid,
no,
and we'd go to kindergarten or whatever, and the teacher would say, "Everybody's gonna draw circles," and then she would look at me and go, "Except for you." It's like, "Oh, okay. Oh, okay, I'll go do whatever I'm gonna do," and thankfully, I'm the oldest of 10 children. Thankfully, my mother had the wherewithal to say, "Okay, just go and do it." And it's nice when you have mentors and coaches who say, "No, you can't," but well, why not? Let's figure it out. And then if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I think that a gift not only is to be a writer, a director, or producer, but is to have your gift to give back.
sure.
And it takes a whole different person to coach somebody, because you have to suppress your ego in aid of somebody else's, and not many people can do that.
And
I think it's
listen really well.
well, it's kind of like you're a parent, you know, and then you get to that point. I know sometimes I sit there and go, okay, you know what? When was working, I had a staff, and I would get like frustrated. I go, okay, here's the deal. I'm the mother, and I said so. End of discussion. It was like we're done, you know. And
I
they
don't
all would go,
find myself.
oh, okay, that's good, and they would stop, you know, because I couldn't get them to. But I think that that's, you know, I think that that's a great thing. I mean, we didn't talk about your individual projects, but I'm happy with that we got to know more about you, and I'm happy. I mean, to me, I thought it was fun. I had a great time.
Awesome.
There's so many things that you do, and I'm hoping that people take advantage of looking at what Chris can offer you, and then think about what you can offer Chris.
Yeah.
This is you're a creative. This is a two-way street. So I
Yeah.
think
And
that I think
recent or your most current project does not define you. So I mean, if you've had success, great, but okay, next project up, what's after that? Or, conversely, perhaps you gave it your all and for whatever reason you didn't achieve the outcome that you desired. That's okay. I mean, the sun comes up tomorrow, it's another day, go create something else and have that. One thing I'd love to leave your listeners with is have that endless stream, or the pipeline, as I call it. So jam that pipeline full of projects, because at any given time you're going to be beginning a project, or maybe you're thinking about, should I get involved in this project, all the way to the completion of a project that maybe is being pumped out and is being seen, right, in theatrical or streaming or somewhere in between. But jam your pipeline full of projects so you always have something else you're working on. It's that what's next, what's the next project you can offer me, and have that. And man, to me, that's really, really important. Don't be a flash in the pan, or I have one project I'm going to talk about for the next 5 years. No one's going to listen.
oh my God, I used to be the moderator on some panels, and every year it'd be the same person with the same script that was there, and they had only that one project. And I'm thinking, you've been pushing it for 15 years. It's not moving. Move on. Do something else, and maybe
Right.
that one will come about. But
Yeah.
And I always say, you follow your gut, never follow your heart, because your heart's going to lead you the wrong way sometimes.
Right.
But your gut will tell you. And you're right. Always keep creating. There's no reason to stop, because if you're an actor, there's no reason why you can't write. If you're a writer, there's no reason you can't act. You just, hone your skills, hone as much knowledge as you can. Take advantage of someone like Chris, who's offering you help. I mean, it's coaching, and and you have to make an investment in yourself, and this is one way you do it. And Chris certainly made an investment in himself, and he's moved on. He's done some really great projects, and
thanks, Angela.
He's still going. I mean, I went through, before I do an interview with somebody, I try to find out what they had for breakfast in kindergarten, and you try to dig as much as you can. And sometimes you have so much information you can't get it all out, but I think the important thing we got out today in my world is that we got to know something about you and what you can do and what you will do. And I think that was great. And I'm hoping that you people out there just take advantage, go to his website, check out his projects, check out what Chris can offer to you as a coach, check out, just support his projects. We only succeed in this business, especially at this level, when we support each other. You can go watch Mission Impossible all you want. Let me tell you, Tom Cruise doesn't give a crap about your $7. But someone, who's an independent, that $7 is a 7 million,
a lot of money.
It is, and you've got to support independence. And that means, this means you go to film festivals, you go to the Netflix, go to the YouTube, go to these stations, follow these people, because sometimes it's about numbers. And I will say that sometimes the people with the most numbers aren't the most talented.
Agreed.
But they're good at marketing themselves. But someone like Chris and even someone like me, we're only going to survive when we get support from everybody. And it doesn't cost too much to be supportive.
And I think interim, Angela, practice your craft, whatever your craft is, whether you act, write, direct, or produce, every single day. Do something, at least one thing every day, where you can say, I did something to practice my craft. And then with any project, there's a saying, you can't boil the ocean or small bites of the elephant. Try to get just a little bit better with every project you do. And those increments build upon themselves, much like a pyramid. It really does. It sounds cliche, but it's so true. Try to get a little better with every project and practice every day, every single day, and you're bound to get a little better and make progress. You can get progress and you can have success. However
however you define it. And you're right, that what we learned in kindergarten, like the book said, carries you all the way through. You're going to fall, you're going to scrape your knee, you're going to do whatever, but you know what? You're going to get success. And it doesn't matter when you start. Chris and I both came back to this at not the tender ages of 20. But it doesn't. You know what? As long as you're breathing and you're walking upright, you have an opportunity to be creative, and that's in your soul. It's definitely in Chris's soul. And again, this is Chris's website, and this is his website. He does offer more than just his projects. He does offer coaching for you. I encourage you to follow him and look him up, and hey, join the party. And Chris, thank you for joining my party. I appreciate it.
Angela, you're a moderator. You're an awesome host. I love your energy and your passion for the business, and it is a business. So thank you so much for the conversation and for having me as a guest.
It's a business, people. You got to do both. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so very much. Go back out there and enjoy the snow. It's April and we have snow and hail. Who knew?
Snow and Earth. Oh well, that's okay.
Yeah, it could be worse, right? Yeah, it could be. The 4 horsemen could be coming down the street. Hey, everybody! Thank you so much. Thank you, Chris. And you know what? Look for the next upcoming interview. You never know who's going to show up, and I'm hoping you enjoy all this as much as I do. Have a good one. Bye now.
You were delightful to speak with. Thank you so much.